Hi, this is Kelsey Pearson, and this is my screencast explaining my action plan for 3 activities regarding social media with my kids. So first, just a quick rundown of what I'll do, and I'll go into this in more detail, but it makes more sense when I'm actually talking about the learning targets if you know what I'm talking about. So the first activity is a list of statements that students need to determine whether or not they are true or false, and there's a whole bunch of them, and they have to use their resources to determine their validity. So that's activity 1. Activity 2, students are given some scenarios in which students applying to colleges were judged on their social media accounts, and we have to determine what's appropriate. And then activity 3 is more of bringing it, I guess, zooming in even further on what is appropriate for our group of students, and being given a list of posts on social media. Are they good? Are they bad? Would you share them? Would you like them? And then jumping off on discussion from there. So those are my general 3 activities. I'll talk more about them in detail in a second. But in terms of learning targets, they're pretty broad. Even the first activity, even though a lot of them are science facts, and I teach science because it's such a broad area that we're trying to cover, I had a really hard time with like every single learning target at some point could fit because of what we're talking about in terms of the list. And then the other 2 activities aren't really related to my science content, and so I stuck with the learning standards that you provided, the AASL ones, which I really liked. I'd never seen those before and spent some time looking through those. The ones for activity 1 that I thought was really great were that the learner is participating in an ongoing inquiry-based process. I thought that this fits really well with the new science standards that we're trying to get as well. They're continually seeking knowledge, so they're constantly determining if something is valid, and then adding that to the model that we have created in their brains of what science is in real life. And so I thought that was a great one. For activity 2 and activity 3, where we're looking more at the appropriate posts, I found some learning targets that were more about ethical sharing and using of information, and then how we apply that personally to either their own learning or their own life. Things we're talking about in terms of social media or digital citizenship is just the appropriate use of that social media, how that reflects on each individual student as well as our organization. Evaluating truthfulness and validity of online information. Are these resources good, whatever we want to put good as? And then just hitting home the importance of what they share is out there forever. The list of resources, I've included a list of all of the facts that I have. A lesson plan I found in terms of sharing or not sharing, and this is kind of where that list of tweets is going to jump off of. And then because these, the second 2 activities were for my extracurricular group, I was looking at the policies that sports teams have on whether or not their players use social media, and thought that was really interesting and can relate that back to what we do. And then finally, another lesson plan in terms of who gets to see what you have out there. So let's talk about the actual activities a little further. Activity 1 is the collection of science, statements, because they're not all true. I actually found this from a collaborative science chat on Twitter that I follow, that I really like. And it's BS facts for bad science. But anyway, there's a list of all of the fake statements or the false statements, and then all of the true statements. And so the goal is to pick 2 of these at least a day and have kind of more of a warm-up type activity where students are presented with these 2 statements and they have to use their resources to determine whether or not they are true. When they think they have determined whether or not these statements are true, they will fill out a Google form saying, yes, it's true, no, it's not, here's why, here's my resources, just kind of a really quick reflection. And then we'll talk about it as a whole group, kind of get a feel for how we go down as a class in terms of our evaluation of truthfulness and validity. Some of the things that probably we'll have to set up at the beginning would be, how do we determine whether a website is appropriate, especially when it comes to science. Some of those posts that you guys put on were really great. There was one about science facts that just looked at facts people make about, or statements people make about science in real life, and kind of figuring out whether those are true or not. And so we'll have to walk through that process. We'll have to walk through how do we discuss this as a group or in small groups. I think because these aren't very emotionally charged topics, it really leads to good space to learn how to have civil discourse. So things like Charles Darwin and Abraham Lincoln were born on the exact same day. Well, that's true. Feels weird, but I don't think anyone in class is really going to get too upset about that. And so instead of having these really emotionally charged discussions, we can just kind of say, hey, here's what I found, here's why, and this is my claim. And I think that really fits in well with the science that we are trying to teach our students. So that's activity 1. Activity 2 is meant for my extracurricular group. We have a bunch of leaders whose social media is a direct reflection not only on them but also on our organization, and so we spend a lot of time talking about their social media, but it doesn't really ever connect with them. Sorry, that's my dog going across a piano mat for my baby. Anyway, it doesn't really connect with them, the importance of making sure that what they post on social media is appropriate. Because really it could come down to, my co-sponsor and myself have been pulled into administration offices for something that another student has posted that we had no control over. So it really does affect our life as well as theirs. So activity 2 is presenting students with some scenarios of kids who are applying to college and then being judged based on what they've posted on their social media. Some of them tend to be a little extreme. That's this one. Here we go. It's the social media scrub out lesson plan. Some of these situations are pretty wild. You've heard about them. So the kids who posted on social media and their admission to Harvard got rescinded because of it. A couple of different posts. So students will be shown a video, we'll discuss it, and then if you notice there was kind of this chart to keep track of as we go through those scenarios. What would you do? Would you say yes? Would you say no? And then are you unsure? And so then we'll pull them all back together and talk about that. And they have a pretty vested interest in this because part of the way that they get into this organization is the sponsors look at their social media. So that's a nice connection for them. And then finally, activity 3 is to kind of follow up on that. So this is kind of big picture, this one, in terms of really, really big consequences. And we kind of want to pull it back in on their level and say, okay, well, what if we looked at just kind of some of the everyday tweets that you would see that don't really go too extreme? How would we rank them? Are these something that are appropriate to share or not to share? And would you like them? Would you retweet them? To kind of get a feel of where we stand, first individually and then as an organization, and what's appropriate. And so students will be presented with some different social media posts, tweets, pictures. This I thought was a really good jumping off point, and then asked to rank them or come up with some ranking system in terms of what they think is good, whatever they decide good is, and what they think is bad, and then come together to discuss what that actually looks like, how the leaders, myself and my co-sponsor of our organization, feel in terms of their ranking system, and then what they need to be looking out for. And then on top of that, how do you change your social media to make sure that you are following what is appropriate, so that 1, you don't have consequences like activity 2, and 2, you reflect positively on our organization. So those are my 3 activities. I'm actually kind of really excited about these. We had our students sign a social media contract for the first time this year because of some issues that we ran into last year, and so I think this plays in really well. I'm hoping to actually finish creating some of the documents so that we can have this at our first meeting before we go back to school, so that we all just kind of start on the same page and know what the consequences are if we or if they don't use social media appropriately. Thanks.